There aren't many ways to define the function of a free press and what journalism is without referencing the way in which journalists are supposed to bring transparency to the most powerful institutions. Nobody needs a free press to bring to the public the messages of institutions of authority and power. They're very capable of doing that themselves. There'd be no value to a free press if that's all they did. If every day you picked up the New York Times and the Washington Post and read what you in fact read in those newspapers, which is X, Y, and Z happened, according to government officials. That's the framework, the standard metric for how media outlets report. But if they don't expose government secrets that the government doesn't want you to know, there's really no value to a free press because it's not serving as a check, an adversarial check on institutions of authority, which is the foundational reason why a free press matters. If you read the founders, the entire idea of checks and balances included what they called the fourth estate, which, though not part of government, is nonetheless a crucial part of the framework to maintain a balance of power between various institutions, knowing that there are people out there who are doing journalism, who are using what was then the printing press and now is all kinds of other technology to check what institutions of authority are saying, to reveal what they're trying to hide, is one of the most crucial ways to keep these institutions of authority honest. One of the ways, arguably the only real way, that we as journalists now have to show the public what these institutions of power are doing in the dark is through leaks. Leaks of the things that they don't want you to see, oftentimes being classified information. Classified information is not some sacred text. Classified information is nothing more than a document or a piece of information that the government has stamped on that word, classified or top secret, because they want to make it illegal for you to learn about it. That's the effect of calling a document classified or top secret. And one of the things I learned in working with many large archives of government secrets and classified material is that more often than not, when the government calls something classified or top secret, it's not because they're trying to protect you, it's because they're trying to protect themselves. They're trying to make it illegal for anybody to show what it is that they're saying and doing in the dark, because what they're saying and doing in the dark is composed of deceit, corruption, or illegality. And that's why the most important journalism over the last 50 years, beginning with the Pentagon Papers, through the WikiLeaks reporting, through the Snowden reporting, and all kinds of other major investigations, have taken place when people have been able to show you, the public, documents and other information that people inside the government wanted you not to see and made it illegal for anyone to show it to you. That's the dynamic between actual journalism on the one hand and powerful institutional state actors on the other. That is always supposed to be what that relationship is about. But along the way, over not since just Trump, but over the last many decades, the largest media corporations in the United States, the New York Times, the Washington Post, NBC News, CNN, have become the opposite of adversarial to intelligence agencies. They have become the leading propagandists, the leading messengers. Whenever the CIA or the FBI or Homeland Security wants to disseminate propaganda, they go to their favorite media outlets, their favorite journalists, they tell them what to say, and those journalists then go and say it. And oftentimes, it's presented as a leak to make you feel like it's unauthorized. They'll refer to anonymous sources to make you to evoke that sentiment of Deep Throat meeting the Watergate reporters in a garage and passing them information, even though that original transaction that's supposed to have that image pop into your mind itself is highly suspicious. But that's what most leaks are when they're given to places like the New York Times and the Washington Post. They have the theater, the appearance, the costume of being unauthorized, but in fact, they're completely authorized. So the CIA goes to Natasha Bertrand, now at CNN, and tells her to say that the Hunter Biden laptop is Russian disinformation, or that Trump has been found to have a secret server with the Russian Alpha Bank, or that Russians have put bounties on the heads of American soldiers and Trump is doing nothing about it, all of which turned out to be totally untrue. Or the FBI goes to Ken Delaney, or the CIA goes to Ken Delaney at NBC News and tells him that the Russians are using some kind of super advanced machine to attack the brains of service members and diplomats in Havana and around the world, the Havana syndrome, to make you think that Trump is allowing Russia to attack our service members without doing anything about it. This is propaganda and deceit. Those kind of leaks. These are authorized leaks from the government. And that's, of course, where Russiagate came from. And it's how the Bush and Cheney administration sold the country on the lies that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, by going to the New York Times and the Washington Post and NBC News and feeding them instructions about what they should say, and then those newspapers mindlessly put it on the front page of their newspaper. And so we learned from the Iraq War, from the War on Terror, and then from the Trump years, including Russiagate, that the real function, the actual function of these media outlets is not to be adversarial at all to intelligence agencies or to the US government, but to be their servants, their messengers, their allies, their propagandists. And oftentimes, they'll go so far, as they did in Russiagate, to even give themselves Pulitzers when they publish information and disseminate information to the public that came directly from the CIA and the FBI, even though it turned out to be totally false. So the fact that this relationship, on the one hand between the largest media corporations in the country, and on the other, the intelligence community in particular, is one of subservience and collaboration, is something that we have been writing about and reporting on and talking about for many years. But what happened in the last 48 hours is really a new manifestation of it. It's a completely new escalation. What they're really telling you is they don't even want to pretend anymore what their real function is. They are basically acknowledging to you that their role is to act as servants for the FBI and the CIA. As you know, we've been covering it on our show. There has been a leak of dozens of classified material, some of which have been labeled top secret. But as we reviewed, there's really nothing particularly dangerous about any of these revelations. There's no even viable argument that it's putting people in harm's way. They don't contain any names of undercover agents in the field. There's nothing in there that is even particularly sensitive. And we tried dissecting these documents to demonstrate to you, based on my experience of many years of working on many different archives of classified information with WikiLeaks, with the NSA, that these are not the kind of documents that are really the most sensitive secrets. That's clear and obvious. But that doesn't mean that they are bereft of important revelations. They do have some important revelations. Some of them show, for example, that the United States, contrary to the claims of the Biden administration, has deployed U.S. special forces inside Ukraine. And there are other NATO countries, including the UK and Latvia and others, that have done the same. Of course, that's something we ought to know. If the government is more involved in the war in Ukraine than they've been telling us. And we'll go through some of the other important revelations, including the fact that the United States government is saying there will be no resolution to the war in Ukraine through 2023. There will be no negotiations. There will be no diplomatic settlement. There will be nothing but ongoing, grinding, endless war that you will pay for, beyond the $100 billion already authorized. That was the purpose of this leak, to show people that the Biden administration has been deceiving the public about the role that we're playing there and about what our objectives are. And there's other important revelations here as well. And yet the New York Times and the Washington Post, instead of protecting sources, which is the role of journalists, instead has led the way to hunting down this source, to hunting down the leaker, to digging in an investigative way to find out who this leaker is and hand that information over to the FBI. They're handmaidens now of the FBI. I've never seen anything like it before. As journalists, we're supposed to rely on leaks. That's what we need and use in order to do our reporting. the idea that a journalist would be the one to actually go and find out who this leaker is and then reveal it publicly to the FBI is something that, honestly, I didn't even think I would see, notwithstanding that there are a few people who hold them in greater contempt than I do. So let's just look at what's really going on here. First, what they did, and the broader context of what the corporate media has become in terms of its relationship to the intelligence community. So as I said earlier this morning, the Washington Post published a lengthy article, the title of which was "Discord Member Details How Documents Leak from Closed Chat Group." And it was actually out last night, and so a lot of people saw it first thing in the morning. And what this was essentially a blueprint for the FBI to find exactly who this leaker was and where he was. It penetrated the Discord group, the small Discord group where these documents were first leaked. They spoke on tape to a 17-year-old who was part of the group, and they stressed they did it with his parents' permission. And the 17-year-old described in great detail who this person was, who was the leaker, that he was a young man in his early 20s, that he was a member of the military, and gave all the breadcrumbs, the digital breadcrumbs for the FBI to find him. I was shocked when I saw this article. I really was. It was focused not on the substantive revelations of what these documents show, but instead on painting the perfect path, kind of leading the FBI down the path with breadcrumbs directly to the door of this leaker. It was incredibly obvious, as soon as you saw this Washington Post article, that the FBI was just a matter of hours before they were going to find the leaker, because the Washington Post led the FBI to him on purpose. And I watched all day today as not a single journalist in corporate media stood up and said, wait a minute, is this really our role? Is it our role now to act as law enforcement, where we're gonna expose leakers to the public and ensure they go to prison? Isn't it supposed to be our role to work with leakers and encourage them to come forward and give us information about what the government is doing in secret that is the truth rather than what they're telling the public? Now journalists play the role of hunting leakers and wanting to see people punished who disclose classified information. But evidently that is not just the role of the Washington Post, but the understanding of the role of almost everybody in corporate media, because virtually nobody stood up and said, wait a minute, we shouldn't be doing this. This is the opposite of our role. Everybody cheered the Washington Post and said, wow, this is an incredibly important and intrepid scoop that they got. Now, it wasn't the FBI who found that where those breadcrumbs led first. It was instead the New York Times. They obviously felt annoyed that the Washington Post had scooped them, and they went one step further. They actually went and found the name of the leaker and announced it to the world and described how the proof that they had that he was actually the leaker. So here is the New York Times article that was just out this afternoon, and there you see the headline. Here's what we know about the leaker, the leader of the online group where secret documents were leaked. Jack Teixeira, a 21-year-old member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard, was arrested on Thursday. There's the article. The leader of a small online gaming chat group where a trove of classified U.S. intelligence documents leaked over the last few months is a 21-year-old member of the intelligence wing of the Massachusetts Air National Guard, according to interviews and documents reviewed by the New York Times. The National Guardman, whose name is Jack Teixeira, oversaw a private online group named Thug Shaker Central, where about 20 to 30 people, mostly young men and teenagers, came together over a shared love of guns, racist online memes, and video games. Note how they're already trying to get you to hate this person by telling you that he was spreading racist memes. Already, that is a signal to the liberal leaders that this is a bad and evil person who you're supposed to hate and be happy has been arrested. Even though he did the work of the New York Times and the Washington Post, which was exposing the reality of the U.S. role in the war in Ukraine. The New York Times goes on, quote, federal investigators have been searching for days for the person who leaked the top secret documents online, but have not identified Airman Teixeira or anyone else as a suspect. Exactly. That's the job of the FBI. The FBI has been searching. They have not found the leaker. until the Washington Post and the New York Times did their job for them of showing the FBI, here's your leaker. We're delivering to you with his head on. We're delivering him to you with his head on a pike. The FBI declined to comment. The New York Times spoke with 4 members of the Thug Shaker Central Chat group, one of whom said he has known the person who leaked for at least 3 years, had met him in person, and referred to him as the OG. The friends described him as older than most of the group members, who were in their teens, and the undisputed leader. One of the friends said the OG had access to intelligence documents through his job. While the gaming friends would not identify the group's leader by name, a trail of digital evidence compiled by the Times leads to Airman Teixeira. So you see there, they weren't even told what their name was. It was the New York Times that, on their own, did that work. The Times has been able to link Airman Teixeira to other members of the Thug Shaker Central Group through his online gaming profile and other records. Details of the interior of Airman Teixeira's childhood home, posted on social media, and family photographs also match details on the margins of some of the photographs of the leaked secret documents. The Times has also established through social media posts and military records that Airman Teixeira is enlisted in the 102nd Intelligence Wing of the Massachusetts Air National Guard. Posts on the unit's official Facebook page congratulated Airman Teixeira and colleagues for being promoted by Airman First Class in July 2022. So there you see what the New York Times did. They did the work of a law enforcement investigator. They followed the trail and found out who this person was, investigated where he lives, and published it, and that's what enabled the FBI to go and find this leaker. It is remarkable. I mean, if you actually think about it, it is remarkable. Let's remember that the function of journalism is supposed to be to try and cultivate sources who have access to this sort of information. When you have a leaker of classified information, and the New York Times has been reporting on these documents, they've been going through these documents and writing article after article after article discussing what it is that they reveal, obviously necessarily signifying that the judgment of the New York Times journalistically is that these documents have real value to the public. The New York Times has been using them in their reporting day after day after day. Now, it is ingrained in you as a journalist that your central overarching duty is to protect people who do this. You're supposed to shield them from being found out. You're supposed to guide them to use encrypted channels so that they're not caught by the government. You're supposed to provide them with secure means in order to enable this information to be given to the public. And remember, so sacred is this journalistic duty to protect sources and try and help them avoid exposure, that if you're a journalist and you get subpoenaed by the government or the courts, and the court orders you to testify about the identity of your source, the person who provided you classified information, you're expected to go to jail. You're expected to refuse to disclose their name and instead go to jail in order to protect your source. And here the New York Times and the Washington Post are doing exactly the opposite. They're working for the FBI and revealing that information to ensure that this source ends up in prison. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update. Catch our full shows for free, live weekdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on Rumble, and join our locals community at greenwald.locals.com for all of my written journalism, exclusive after-show Q&As, and more.